Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this night-ending bonus, shall we? Alright guys, so earlier today I received an email. The heading said, former Marine, channel comment lurker, livestream lurker, not a troll. So I was curious immediately. And the body of the email was real small. Former Marine, I have some very interesting information I'd like to share with you. There are some restrictions. Please reach out as soon as possible. And so, a phone number. And I called him up. How you doing? Jeff, how are you? Recognized my voice right off. And we got to talking. And he was involved in a training exercise turned live fire kind of assault in California. Because of anonymity, the name will not be used. His name will not be used. His rank will not be used. As well as the exact date. And then as we talked, he said, you know, I know that if they are listening, chances are they're not going to know it was me that told this, but they will know exactly what you are talking about 100%. Not even sharing the date. So it's just this happened just outside of Lost Canyon, California. These guys were on a Marine Corps mountain warfare training out of Bridgeport, California, and they had been doing their exercise training. There was 2 teams out there, 13. For those of you who were Marines, you will know exactly what I'm going to say. There were 13 men in each team, split into 3 teams of 4 and 1 team leader. So there was 2 teams training together at this Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center. They had been there for about a week. It was routine up until a certain time and date, which for his anonymity and his safety, we can't mention. They will like he said, they will figure it out if they do listen. And he said he has a real sneaky suspicion that they listen to any kind of YouTube platform that talks about cryptids, talks about UFO, any kind of secret society stuff that the armed forces as a whole have certain divisions dedicated right for that. The Marine Corps work with he doesn't think that the Marines do, but the Navy and the Air Force definitely do, and the Army of course does. That monitor internet kind of stuff, like what we talk about here. And he said, it's not just one channel, it's the broad kind of that they monitor. And anytime certain kind of flag words pop up, they will listen. And he knows that for a fact because he had a friend that worked in the Air Force that was his position, was monitoring internet activity and stuff like that. So they had been training, just, learning, obviously, mountain warfare. It was before, I can give you this much, it was in the time that it was needed. We were amping up and already in Afghanistan, so it was pre-2000, right around that time. And they had been going through all these drills and stuff, and they had gotten called into a briefing room, both teams. So 26 men in total. 2 team leaders, 24 Marines. Now, what they were told was that just outside of Lost Canyon, there's a hiking area, Mokalami Peak. And if I massacred that, I apologize, Mokalami. And apparently there had been 4 hikers out there that had been hiking, camping, were attacked, and 3 made it out. Barely 3 made it out. And of course, the grumblings were, well, why can't the forestry services handle this? They really couldn't question, obviously. It's their job and they're Marines. They don't question, they just go. But amongst themselves, they can question each other. What do you think's going on? So they get the briefing, they get kind of situated with where they are going to be. Now, this peak, Mokalami, is kind of situated deep in California. I believe it's part of the Sierra Nevada or part of the Toyabe and Humboldt mountain range. It's in that area, and he couldn't remember. He just remembers that those are the 2. He wasn't. He's not from California, and that's not where he was stationed out of. They were just training there. So they end up being told that they're going to kind of start this whatever hunt they're tracking something, and apparently the Forestry Service need some assistance. Now, right there is a red flag for everyone that was in that room that day, including the two team leaders who, as everything's getting told to these men, they have a look of like, not shock, but this is all very strange. They kind of meet in this area called Salt Springs Reservoir and Lower Bear River Reservoir. And they're going to push into the Mukalami Peak. So where they are going in, they are kind of pushing, was it like northeast, he said. Not too far northeast, but more east than northeast, into this mountain range. Now, they're told, first and foremost, that the terrain is rugged. There are caves there. We feel that you guys are adequate enough. You've been training for this. Let's get, some more experience while not on the battlefield. So they're getting all their gear ready. One of the one of the team leaders says, because of course these guys are now questioning, they're no longer in front of the superiors. They're like, what the hell are we going to do? What could we possibly be needed for on American soil? And, how often does this happen? Every question for a 20-year-old that is completely confused would have. One of the guys just says, I don't know. I heard something along the lines of, we are going to be engaging in a large creature. Think Bigfoot, but bigger. They're all like, what the hell does that mean? No one at this point knows anything. The two team leaders are then called right before, about an hour and a half before they're going to deploy to the area. Two team leaders are called. One comes back. So now it is 25 men in total. And it wasn't the one that said, think Bigfoot, but bigger. They get out to the location, and he remembers they had to hike in from an area called Blood Ridge, which was, the name stuck with him because he was like, this does not feel good. This does not sound good. We're hiking in from Blood Ridge, heading into limbo. They get to an area just past North Fork Trail, and they get to the tip of the Salt Spring Reservoir. At that point, they're told by comms to wait. Do not engage in anything. Wait until further instructions come in. About 3 hours goes by, and 3 other Marines come in. They are Marines, but they're nobody that anyone knows. None of these, the team leader has no idea who these guys are. They've never been seen. It's just, and obviously you're not going to know every Marine, but there was something off about these three men. He said we were all 20 something years old, full of just piss and vinegar. He said, but these three men were a totally different caliber of what a Marine is. He said, these guys are basically what, that old commercial with the Marine fighting the dragon represented. They all kind of converge. The one head of this three Marine team meets with the team leader. They discuss what's going on, and they start to hike into the Mokalami Peak area. They're not going to the peak. They're hiking kind of straight up into just this real deep wilderness. There's a lot of granite rock in there. There's just a lot of areas where you could be hurt. So as they're hiking in, the leader of the three-man team, who obviously outranks anyone there, is now in charge of this operation. He tells, this is how we are going to be in formation hiking into here. Everyone needs to be hyper aware of all of your surroundings. In case we all have live ammunition. If it comes down to, and there is you have to, discharge your weapon, make sure your teammate in front of you or behind you is not in the way of that round. At this point, everyone, he's like, what the hell are we getting into? They can't communicate with each other at that point, you can, but you can't, so they are then broken down into two lines. They're about 100 feet apart. And there's 24 of the original Mountain Corps warfare training members of that. So there's 12. Two of the men that came in that three-man team are in the back of that. So you've got a line of 12 and another line of 12, 100 feet apart, of men who have been training together for about 8 days. They're fairly familiar with each other. They've known each other. They trust each other. They don't know these two guys that are behind them, though. All right. Now, in the front is the team leader and the man that was in charge of the whole operation. They get hiking from the head of this salt spring reservoir, and they are going straight into this just rocky terrain, but it's woods too. There's deep woods, but it's rocky terrain. They hike for about 4 hours in before they kind of stop. It's, like I said, there's a lot of woods, there's a lot of crevices, there's a lot of crevices that have filled with water that are ponds, but they're just real weird looking. That's what he said. He's from an area in the United States where ponds are, look like ponds. He said they were ponds. They weren't man-made, but they didn't look like a pond from where I was from. They're a mountain pond. These crevices that have filled with water over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. Now, they get to a location where they stop, they break. They can now communicate, talk to each other. Two guys that were behind the two lines had been talking to each other quietly, but not quiet enough, because about 4 of the other Marines that were in the tail of the formation, the two formations, had overheard these guys talking. Now, where the gentleman that I spoke to, he was not middle, but more or less closer to the front of the line. So these 4 guys are now talking to their fellow teammates who they are familiar with. And they hear, these 2 guys saying, I hope that we are not, hunting down one of those werewolf creatures. And they're kind of telling each other this. The Marines are not the other 2 are now, the 2 in the back are now with their leader, the main guy. And the 25 are just, they're all in one big area, but they're broken down and talking and eating something, drinking, maintaining. So the conversation amongst a few of these guys are, what the hell does these idiots mean by werewolf? Are they busting our balls? Chuckling and stuff. Team leader for these 25 is now in the conversation. And he said, listen, I'm not supposed to say anything of what we are going after, but there were 4 hikers, 3 made it out. They are barely clinging to life, these 3. But there is something in this mountain range, in this area, that is very deadly, very violent. He said, the question came up, where are the forest rangers? Forest rangers are not involved in this. They are the ones that called us in. Actually, they're the ones that called these 3 in. We were brought in for added support. Okay, so, how do we know what we are going to shoot, what we are hunting, what the hell, and why are these guys saying werewolf? That's the, whole gist of that conversation. Well, they get refreshed and they start moving up a little ways into this mountain range. They hiked for about another hour, and at about that 1 hour mark is where shit hit the fan. They had been in this area a total of about 7.5 hours waiting for, they had to wait for these 3 guys to come in, and then the hike in, and then the break, and then the hour walk. So they hear just this roar out of nowhere. They're surrounded by wilderness and rock formations just, and this roar kind of just echoes through the forest all around them. Naturally, everyone in the two lines are now freaked out. They're spinning around, looking at each other like, what the hell did we just hear? It was not a growlish roar. It was just this very bassy, terrifying roar. He said, I've never heard anything like it prior or after. He said, but I know when people talk about Bigfoot and Dogman and how they feel something in their chest, he said we could feel it through our bodies. He said a couple of the guys had said that they almost urinated on themselves because of the roar, the bass of it. Not out of fear, hopefully not, he said, but, because we're Marines. But out of the bass, out of just this terrible body shaking roar. The team leader falls back into a kind of V pattern, and they are told to spread out no further than 200 feet, the last two guys in the back, which are now just the team members. Those other two guys fanned off of that, team leaders in the front, and the gentleman who was in charge of the three men is 15 to 20 feet ahead of the team leader. So picture a V formation about 200 feet apart at the very base of it, and then at a point with team leader and then this very high-ranking Marine. Two men about 20 feet off of that 200 feet there, and they are now proceeding to go into this area where the forest kind of got less dense, but the rocky terrain was much worse. And they're walking up. They do not have the upper advantage. They do not have, the high point of the fight. Which everyone now, after this mountain training exercise that they've been, knows that that's not a good thing. You always want to have the upper advantage. Nothing is said except safety's off, and if you hear this man in the front shoot, see where he's shooting and shoot. If you see the two men in the back shoot as well, follow their lead and shoot. Do not break formation. Stay in this V, whatever you do. Now, at this point, they're all looking around them. He remembers looking at his team leader and then looking at the higher ranking Marine that was in charge of the whole operation. He said he watched what he was doing the whole time they were in this formation. He followed his line of sight wherever kind of he went. He said, we got to this kind of high point, but not the highest point, and we saw movement. we were told to stop and secure the area where we were. The men opposite of us were to now turn and walk in between our men. So we were in a straight line now, as kind of a curved, and we had, when we fired, we had our rounds, or it was a point of fire pattern that, it was centered on one location, and the pattern we were in was almost a semicircle, but not quite as large as a semicircle. The higher ranking Marine and team leader are now standing together and pointing, talking. You hear this really loud growl, just this loud vocal growl. And you saw this head pop up from behind this kind of creviced area. What these men saw at that point was something that no 20-year-old, no human being on this planet Earth should ever witness. The head of this creature was at least 3 to 4 times the size of our head at that point when they were looking at it. This thing stood up, and it was huge. I will tell you the exact measurements at the end of this exact experience. I'll sharing it how he shared it with me. This thing stands up, and all they see is this monstrous creature. It is hairy, but not hairy. Very hair from neck down. But sparse. You could still see patches of skin through the hair. He said, picture a hairy hirsute man, his chest, but all over his body, going from probably the chest, sternum area down. You could see that it was a male, and as it stood up, it took one step. The man in charge of the Marine in charge of the whole operation at that point said, put this thing down or we're all going to die. As they are shooting at this thing, they're shooting 5.56 NATO rounds. It's coming at them at a very fast pace, but it's only taken 3 to 4 steps. And it's almost on top of them. As it gets maybe to the 30-foot range, it drops. It falls kind of face first, and there's just this kind of thwack, this just really wet kind of sound. He thought at that point that it was all the blood, but they're now standing around this creature. The older Marine gets the 2 guys that he came in with. They are now talking to each other. He sends the two over to the body. They feel around, touch it, and it is deceased. It is put down. The Marine in charge of everything, of the two men, and of the whole operation, has one of the other guys come over to him, and he gets on some sort of radio, not your basic comm that they use in the field. It looked like a sat phone. All the Marines then are told, flip this thing. We got to flip this thing over. We have to take measurements. This, and that. It takes all of the men to flip this thing over. They get it flipped over. One of the two guys that came in with the Marine in charge, the higher ranking Marine, pulls out some equipment, and they start to determine measurements of this creature. Now, he said, "Jeff, I will never forget these measurements. I have only shared this experience with my wife. I've never talked about it because I've never wanted to think about it in that aspect of how I was thinking about it as I was telling you this." He said this creature, it was 18 feet, 9 inches long, or in height. Its head was 65.5 inches in circumference. That's huge. That is huge. They are then told that they now need to move this thing to an area where they can get a helicopter in to get this thing out of here. What they then do is they all have climbing rope, and they kind of fashion these crude harnesses, and they end up dragging this thing about, I'd say he said, a half a mile, eighth of a mile out, somewhere between. It was a long time, and it took everyone's strength to get this thing to an open area where a helicopter could come in and get this thing out of here. How they were going to get it on the helicopter, they had no idea. He's like, I have no idea. It took us all we could do to drag this thing. And there was 25 of us. We fashioned our ropes, we wrapped our ropes around its wrists, and we had 12 men on each side. We harnessed, they fashioned the rope to, where they had their own anchorage point to pull it. They got it. They got it to this very flat location to where a helicopter could come in and pick this thing up. Around 4 hours later, a helicopter comes in, and they had been sitting with this thing for 4 hours. The thing smelled like just filth. a couple of guys had gotten sick from smelling it. It was a very overpowering, musky kind of just... He said if he had to guess what a cow's asshole smelled like, he said that's what this thing probably smelled like. He said it smelled so bad, Jeff. It was the filthiest stink he has ever smelled. He said it faintly smelled of urine, and he thinks that was because of like the hair, the sweat from this thing sticking in the hair. But the smell was just like, it was a very overpowering, musky, rancid smell. A couple of the guys were making jokes about, you know, it's manhood, this and that. The helicopter comes in and it flies over about 20 feet above the ground. A cargo net is then dropped flat, unhooked from the helicopter. They move this thing onto the cargo net. 4 corners meet in a hook. It's then fashioned to, the hook is then clipped to a winch that's in the helicopter. It's winched up. As the helicopter and the winch are raising up off of the ground, you can hear the tension from the cargo net, the harness, everything, and it kind of makes that real tensed sound, that sound. The helicopter, of course, doesn't have an issue picking this up. It's a helicopter. I mean, it's huge. It's not a little bird. It's used to transport vehicles. It's a Skorsky CH-53 Super Stallion that doesn't have an issue, but the noise is from the winch chain and netting of this thing. They do not know he doesn't know the exact weight of this thing. But with its head size being that large and its body size being as big as it is, and then to drag the thing, you know, he said it easily weighed 1,200 pounds. He said this thing was just, on top of the terrain we're dragging this thing, you know, it was just a pain right in the ass. The helicopter flies away. Gone. They are then told, you know, let's get out of here. We're going back to the mountain training warfare area. And, you know, no questions, no nothing right now. Let's go and debrief. They're then brought to this debriefing room where they end up finding out that the man, the Marine who was in charge of the operation, was in 2005 a lieutenant colonel, which they all kind of were like, wait, what? You know, because it's not, he's an officer, but, you know, it's not unheard of, but it's not real something common that you hear. As they are in there is a brigadier general in 2007 talking to them. They are all told and congratulated on the job well done. No casualties were accrued. Nothing happened to any of the Marines. But this is a matter of national security. And we are all told to sign these non-disclosures if anyone is ever found out to ever talk amongst each other about this mission that they were just on. You will be court-martialed. You will lose all rank and pay. And you will serve prison time. You cannot talk to your best friend, your battle buddy, your best friend that you were there with. You do not talk about it. You do not talk to your training officer about what just happened. They all signed their lives away. And, of course, they do talk amongst themselves. Their training officer, who was a sergeant, he was a master sergeant, had told them, do not, after this whole debriefing, do not speak about this. I will talk to you once about it right now, but after this, we will not ever talk about it. If you have something to say about what occurred, now's the time. It's us. It's us 25. Get it out now and move on. What did we just kill? Was that a Bigfoot? Who were those 3 Marines? I don't know who those 3 are. They are some sort of special team in the Marines that is above my pay grade, above anything that I am capable of knowing, he responds. And no, that was not a Bigfoot. That was a giant. And they all kind of looked at each other and, giant? What do you mean, giant? Goliath. There are more of these things throughout the world. There are more of them in the United States. We don't know how many, but this thing would have never ever have even come to our attention if it hadn't attacked the 4 hiker campers. If it had just did nothing to, bring attention to itself, it probably would still be in those mountains. But because of the public, we had to go and take care of it. And that is the last we are going to talk about it. Understood. Understood. And that is what this man shared with me. He has never said a word to it about this mission except to his wife after they had been married and after they have had 2 kids. He has never spoken to any of none of his other, team members, teammates ever talked about it. He does speak to a couple of his former Marine buddies that were there that day. They've never ever brought it up again. He has been wanting to share that experience, but just really didn't have the courage to do so. And I said, it does take a lot of courage, especially in the predicament that you are putting yourself into right now. He said, this is, years ago. I'm a hell of a lot older than I was. There's also 25 of us that know this experience. It'd take him a little while to get to me, he said. And, he is a firm believer that right now we talked about this, he thinks we are in the beginning of the end. This is a biblical sign where these creatures are now coming out, making themselves known. He's a very religious person. He had never went to church growing up in his life. After this experience, he became very religious, just a devout Christian, and he is wholeheartedly believes that these things are not natural. They are quite possibly Nephilim. But he needed to get this out so he could, move on. I needed to move on. I've held on to this story for so long that I needed to share this. And I've heard Dogman encounters. He said he remembers hearing about the two Marines, the one that had it by Camp Lejeune, and then the other Marine that was overseas that saw that chimera looking thing. He said it was time that I got my experience out there, because he knows and was told for a fact that there are more of these giant humanoid monsters throughout the United States, throughout the world. Our government definitely knows about them. And they are just burying it deeper and deeper, even though they know that we are, at the cusp of this crazy war that we're about to have with these creatures. He said that when he heard the chimera story, he almost emailed me about a year ago, but he just couldn't get the stones to do it. Well, there you have it, folks. Tonight's night ending bonus. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and honestly what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free, just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there. They're definitely dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just save their lives someday. Till next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. God bless.